In the 16 years since Teen Titans ended with the episode Things Change, it's only gotten more controversial. While initially it was just accepted that this episode was a garbage attempt to end the series on a cliffhanger in order to jumpstart fan efforts for a potential season 6, over time more and more people have started to appreciate it for what it is, and as you can tell from this video's title, I am one of those people. Now I've talked about how much I love this episode 3 times on this channel, twice in videos now unlisted and once in one video that's still up, so I'm not just going to make the video about that. Instead, also talking a bit about my interpretation of the episode and its place in this action comedy series as an episode that's not really action nor comedy.
Things were never the way you remember. Now just leave me alone.
Before getting into all of that though, I thought it would do this video good to give a quick recap for those who haven't seen the episode recently. If you want to know more about the events of the series that lead up to this episode, you can check out my Slade video, which should conveniently be in a card above if I remember, but to give a slightly longer overview of this episode in particular, it starts with the Titans arriving back in Jump City after a world-traveling adventure throughout the season, only to discover that the city has changed since they were last there. As they are unraveling this, they are attacked by a mysterious monster that can change into pretty much any substance. While fighting this monster, Beast Boy thinks that he sees Tara in the crowd. After finding that her body is missing, he eventually finds her at a school, although she has no memory of him. After they hang out for a while, she eventually leaves, and Beast Boy returns to the Hall of Mirrors where he first found out about her alliance with Slade, only to find Slade there again, albeit just a robot replica. Finally, after she quasi-hints that she actually knows of her past, Tara tells Beast Boy that she's just a high school student, and Beast Boy, who has been missing the pursuit of the monster in order to stalk Tara, eventually relents to this truth and rejoins the team, ending the episode with neither plot being fully resolved. Okay, so that was admittedly a lot. We'll get back to all of that later in this video, but before jumping really deep into this one, we gotta first answer one question that really controls your entire interpretation of this episode. Are the events depicted in this episode actually happening? And as you can probably guess, the answer is kinda murky. To start with reasons this may all just be in Beast Boy's head, there's a ton of symbolism and quote-unquote hidden messages that one can take from this episode to support this. I'll link a Reddit post from a while back that lists a bunch of them, but just to share some of my favorites, Tara is seen through a reflection in this episode's highest moment of tension regarding her true identity. Right before this, the pizza is handed only to Beast Boy and not to Tara, indicating that Beast Boy may actually be sitting there alone. And then furthermore, digging more into a conspiracy mode, the guy that is seen next to Tara in the crowd at the beginning is the same guy seen with the Tara lookalike in the bar later. And finally, Robin literally says,
"Sometimes you want to see something that isn't there."
Again, there are more reasons to support this interpretation, which you can see on the Reddit post, but you can look into that more if you wish. On the other side of the coin, reasons to support this episode happening are a bit more sparse, but perhaps a bit more solid. The real biggest reason, and honestly the only one that really makes sense to me to support this being the case, is that the comics that follow the series, which are ambiguously canon, do confirm that the schoolgirl is actually Tara, and that the events of this episode do actually unfold. So yeah, it's definitely not black and white, although I definitely come down on the side of this episode being mostly, if not entirely, in Beast Boy's head. Not just because of the evidence I just listed, but mostly because otherwise this episode just doesn't make any sense. Just to list some ways that this episode feels off in a strictly direct interpretation, it's super weird that Beast Boy just doesn't tell the rest of his team that Tara's statue is gone. It's really the only solid evidence that Beast Boy has for her reappearance at this point, and he just neglects to mention it. The way that Slade acts makes zero sense in any way unless he's actually just a figment of Beast Boy's mind that personifies his inner fear. There's a bunch of little things that don't make sense either, like Beast Boy just chilling in a high school with no one really caring. With all of this in mind, I think it's reasonable to assume that these events aren't actually occurring, or that at least large chunks of this episode are either Beast Boy actually having a mental breakdown and imagining things, or the whole episode is entirely symbolic. I don't think the episode really wants to solidify this in fear of messing with the actual message of the episode, so I really think it fits the finale more to be unclear.
You're the Teen Titan. That's who you are. That's not me.
Okay, 1,000 words in, and we can actually now get into the episode. It is so freaking weird. I mean, just to take a step back, even if you're just casually watching these episodes instead of studying every single one like a dumb cartoon YouTuber, you will definitely still notice how weird this episode feels. Like, we go from some classic haha funny superhero story stuff that permeates throughout all of season 5 to this nearly action and comedy devoid dramatic tale. I mean, just look at some of these shots. This is not how the show generally shows scenes. The shots shots are longer, they're more cinematic, and the episode barely focuses on the action subplot in the background. Speaking of that, the show's action has debatably never been slower than in this episode. Some of this definitely comes from the episode being a bit rushed, but I think that's the result of the episode likely being tagged on at the end of the already planned 5th season. Speaking on that for a second, I really don't buy the idea of this not being intended as a finale. Despite some various conflicting reports, those closest to the show indicate that the decision to cancel came midway through writing the 5th season, so I really don't understand how this couldn't have been intended as the finale. Anyway, back to this episode just being wacky, the score is also off from being typical for the show, being really piano-based, a la Evangelion. You know, there really is a good Evangelion comparison here about both action shows having a rushed, non-action finale being corrected with a movie sequel that's more akin to the quality present in this series, but I already brought anime into a non-anime video this summer, so I'll let this one go. Anyway, back to talking about this episode being rushed, I don't want to make it sound this episode is ugly or anything. Yes, it is stiffer than almost any other episode since the 1st season, and yes, there are definitely some corners cut, but it still has some of the most beautiful shots in the show. And that really brings me to the last thing I want to talk about in this video, which is basically breaking the promise I made at the beginning and just gushing about how much I love it. I'll keep it relatively brief, I really do want to try to keep this video about 10 minutes, but how do people seriously not like this episode? The first scene in the episode is really the only one in which the conversations between the Titans feel natural, and the quick ending to this scene with the monster is fantastic. The fight really starts the episode's attempt to feel off, as it almost intentionally pauses for the intro before continuing into the fight, showing that the fight clearly isn't the main thing going on here. The Titans confronting Beast Boy is a really neat scene too. It's one of those examples of, yes, it does look worse because they're cutting corners, but the way that they pose the shot makes it still work really well. I will say that the whole every Titan says something in sequence is probably at its worst in the series here though.
You better have a good reason for bailing on us.
What was so important that you couldn't stay with the team?
We could have used your assistance. Well,
I feel like a lot of this video is just me making excuses for this episode, but I really have nothing for this. But anyway, watching Beast Boy go back through his last good memory with Terra is heartbreaking, and the episode doesn't hold the audience's hand about it. The episode in general is really good about that, letting the audience feel how off everything is. Terra and Beast Boy's date is painful, as Beast Boy is reminded of everything he lost with her betrayal. Speaking of her betrayal, reusing the Hollow Mirror scene from season 2 to introduce Slade is so sick. I love the scene in that season, and I love its redux here too. The series has always been really good about showing anger through its fight scenes, and it's on full display here. Just like in Betrayal, Beast Boy is fighting brutally compared to his usual goofy self. And yes, it is a bit of a cop-out to have it be a Slade bot at the end, but without literally having Beast Boy murder Slade in this episode, it's likely the best they could do to also show Beast Boy winning. Finally, and yes, I know I'm skipping past the scenes with the monster, which yes, despite having some further indications towards the theme of change, are definitely just filler for the episode and something to do with the other 4 Titans. The final scene of this episode and the series is absolutely brutally beautiful. The music is my favorite from the series, being this fantastically understated piano piece, and the clear indication that Terra is lying to Beast Boy and that he knows it is done so well. I touched on it briefly before, but this is the best line and shot of the show.
Things changed, Beast Boy. The girl you want me to be is just a memory.
And the rest of the scene is a perfect end to this nearly perfect episode too. The voice direction is just incredible, and the ending with Beast Boy running into the unknown, finally accepting that, well, to put it bluntly, things change, is a weirdly great end to the series. Except that it isn't the actual end of the series, as the movie came out after this season. Listen, if you want to hear a younger me talk about Trouble in Tokyo and worse audio quality with no background music, you can find the unlisted video in the playlist on my channel, but I think the movie definitely takes a bit away from the whole Beast Boy depression thing by having him crush on Japanese girls the entire time. But hey, I get that ending your series with an episode focused on everybody's 3rd or 4th favorite Titan is not a great idea, so I really can't blame them for it. Anyway, that's about all I wanted to say about this episode. I know this video is a bit short for the channel, but I really just wanted to make a video finally giving Things Change the runtime that it deserves. And trying to spread 22 minutes of episode footage in what I already assume is like a 9-minute video is hard enough, so I'll leave it here. If you guys want to yell at me for being wrong and dumb and stupid, feel free to comment or find me on Twitter down below. To end this video, I'd like to use a quote from a really interesting interview that I'll link to in the description with Glenn Murakami, one of the main influences behind the show. When asked about the finale, he says, "I think Things Change in a way is a reaction to fans taking it too seriously or projecting too much onto the characters." This has been Apple Samuel, and I'll see you in about 3 weeks with a video that promises to be much less pseudo-intellectual. Thanks for watching.